Well, hey, John Gustafson, how you doing?
Doing well, Greg. Nice to see you again.
It's been a long, long while with lots of stuff going on, I'm sure. And as everybody can see, we're joined by another individual, and that's John Waters. John, how are you?
Hey, Greg, good to see you. Again, it has been a while, but good to be here.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I think you were on my last flight, believe it or
Uh,
not, from Shanghai that night. So, anyway, hey, the reason everybody John Waters is here is because, as you know, I've retired, and we thought it'd be prudent to bring somebody else in instead of me for the remaining period of time that we have negotiations going on, and we're doing the unscripted. Unfortunately, as you can see, John is younger, better looking. He's going to be more eloquent, and he also has a YouTube presence already. So like I said, good thing my ego is not that crushable. But I think John is going to do a great job to keep everybody informed and keep Unscripted going the way that it has been in the past. So, with that intro, why don't we get into John Gustafson, talk a little bit about your last session with the company 2 weeks ago?
Right. Hey, great. Thanks for being here, and thanks, John, for helping us out. Excuse me. So 2 weeks ago, we met in Charlotte. That was our first set of mediated bargaining with the mediator, and following uh, some introductory remarks that the mediator had with both parties separately, we started that afternoon bargaining. And what we did, we first presented a full language proposal in Section 1 on scope. Michael Winston out of Manhattan's our attorney. He joined us virtually, and we went through a 10 point uh, highlight. Well, a language proposal that incorporates 10 bullet points of issues that have been identified as very important to the pilots. I'm not going to go through all 10 of them. We've gone over those some in the past, but some of the issues that are they're they're easier ones like successor and merger. It's a lot of admin cleanup that would make our contract look more like another Alpha one. And then there's other ones that are different levels of complexity and difficulty. There's reduced crew operations. Section 1B4, which has to do with the part loads and charters uh, that we are now calling contract carriers. Some of the contracts call it common carriage. This basically deals a lot with what's going on in the whitetail environment, in the purple, orange, and white. And and then there's a lot of issues that could be wrapped up under regarding transparency. We've talked to the company quite a bit about transparency, and 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 the reason we're talking to them about transparency is because regarding Section 1, we've told them every time, and we'll say it again right now. Our job as the negotiating committee, one of them is to provide protection for the pilots and for their careers. But at the same time, we are not here to hamstring the company. We want the company to have the ability to prosper, to grow and expand and move forward. We just want to make sure we're not left in the wayside when this happens. And so a lot of this could be solved with the transparency, with data access that's responsibly handled, where we can see, look, the description of the whitetail uh, stuff that's being flown is that it's low yield stuff. In fact, that's what the skipper threatened Mav with, to go fly if he didn't shape up there in Top Gun back in Greg's day and out there in Miramar. So they have said that you know what's going on on these aircraft is low yield stuff, and that's fine. We would just like to be able to verify that that's what's going on there. So, Section 1, because it involves different arms of the company and the corporation, not just flight ops. It's a complex subject. It's difficult, um, and I think we'll get there. There's going to be a lot of hard bargaining associated with Section 1, but it's certainly within the realm of achievement. We understand that in the TA, there was a lot of unhappiness about Section 1. And I'll try not to go off on a really long rant, but I said this the other night when I spoke at the Hub Turn, and I continue to do so. We have a really disparate seniority list. about 1,000 people up, at my end of the woods, and down, John's one of them. The company's hired over 55% of the pilots since 2015. So what I tell the pilots, who I've known for, coming up on 30 years this summer, that if you want your retirement fixed, then we have to recognize the concerns of the junior pilots, especially in Section 1. And for the junior pilots, hey, if you want to have, I have no idea. We have no idea if there's going to be stagnation here or if there's going to be outstanding growth or whatever. But if you want pilots in the upper end of the list to retire, then and you want them to retire in order for your career to have the opportunity to advance. So Section 1 is very important to this overall contract. We believe that it's probably the linchpin to it. And that's why we have made it very clear that we had to take a different approach this time. Alpa National has been very good to us. They secured us outside counsel. They're picking up his tab. We've got multiple lawyers working on this section. We provide input because we're the operators, but by no means do we have 3 or 4, 5 pilots in here writing Section 1. It's far too complicated of a subject, and we feel good about it. The company, they would, let's be truthful. If they had their way, there would be no Section 1. But Section 1's at the front of our contract because everything else stems downward for that. If you don't have a Section 1, you don't have much of a contract. So that's what we started off with. Then on Wednesday, we actually received their retirement counter proposal. We gave the company our retirement proposal in October of 23. In fact, October 23 of last year in Chicago. We have been encouraged to get all our issues out on the table as quickly as we can. And with the exception of scope, which we gave in a bullet point format the last section time we met in Philadelphia, we've had our entire economic package on the table since October 24th in Chicago. And then we think that we are addressing retirement in a very responsible way. I'll tell you what the company came back with, and I'll go back as a reminder of what we are working on. The company came back with what was in the TA, except a little bit less, and that the TA had 3 tiers to the FAE cap, 325. We'd be at 330 right now because it was going to step in January 1st of 2025, and then it went up again in January 1st of 27 to 338. So they came back less than the TA, which we reminded them of, but they'll say, well, that was $5,000 ahead of what they offered the last negotiating committee or proposed to them prior to those talks ending. So here's the deal, and I'll try not to make this go on forever regarding retirement. The company for years, and when I mean years, I mean like I was at bargaining in 2004 through 6, where they wanted to put new pilots on a different plan. Back then, it was called the cash balance plan. It was the same plan that other not everyone else at FedEx was being unilaterally transitioned to, and it was it's a portable pension plan, and that you could take it if you worked someplace in the company and then left and went to a different company. You took those pension credits, converted to cash, and left. And it was based on the T-bill rates, and our R&I people at the time assessed it like at 23 cents on the dollar. We actually walked out of the room when they proposed that. So over the years, the FAE cap hasn't increased, and there's been a lot of reasons for that. Like I've mentioned before, this is my 4th time bargaining, and the first time I did it, George Sees, who was running it for FPA, delegated that to the retirement bargaining to 2 other pilots and myself. And what we were trying to overcome is what happened during the early 90s. The Clinton administration came up with over 93. And one of the things associated with that was that the most income that could be considered for retirement was $150,000. So that instantly cut our pension down to $75,000. So we spent our entire negotiating capital, 98.5% of it, or whatever you want to view it, fixing retirement. And we did it quite creatively. Every other carrier went about doing it and had what was called a non-qual fix. Only American Airlines had a qualified fix. which meant that the money was actually set aside. You wouldn't have to pay FICA tax on it when you retired. And we actually went out and employed the same ERISA attorney that the APA used. She couldn't use the same formula because it was proprietary, but she came up with another formula. And in the end, we actually went with the formula that the company had on the shelf from the previous ALPA negotiating, which is called the flat dollar formula. It's in our contract now. So back then, the limit for the FAE cap was $260,000. And the way that got set is there's a limit of how much compensation could be considered. Then there's another one of how much could be paid out in retirement. In 98, 99, that was $130,000. So that's where we came up with 260. And in 99, it would almost be impossible to achieve making $260,000 here at FedEx. So you fast forward, we go 2004 and 6, so we bargained, and several things were in play there. One of them, we called it the gold standard, that basically we wanted to get the hourly rates so a top of scale wide body captain could max his retirement without having to sell vacation and draft. And every bargaining is contextual. If you look what was going on in the rest of the industry, they had been decimated by 9/11, and they were losing all these pensions and bankruptcy. So we had a very good retirement coming out of the 99 contract, and then it just got magnified much better because of the unfortunate circumstances that happened everywhere else in the industry except UPS. We could have moved the cap a little bit, and when I mean a little bit, under $10,000, I was in the room the last day, and they said we can move the cap, but you'd be better served waiting off to it next time. We also thought, well, it would be disingenuous to say now we need to move the cap significantly because we just spent the whole time talking to the pilots about the gold standard of maxing out your retirement by just flying the line. And the thing about this is that if you're doing a plan amendment or going in this kind of a direction, you have to get Internal Revenue Service approval. And the conventional wisdom was back there is, you can maybe do that about every 8 years, certainly not every contract, because that draws attention to you're asking the IRS to look the other way on how this thing happens. So it didn't happen in 2006. We had the bridge contract in 11, and it didn't happen in 2015. After that, there was a lot of study by the union of how to maybe make something else work outside of Section 6, and then we got into Section 6 bargaining. So the company, that's kind of an abridged version of what's gone on, but the company, because of the defined benefit, and the funding rules have changed post 9/11. The company is looking to lower their PBO, pension benefit obligation, right? For every time they got to set aside money based on me. And, if we had a 29-year-old, I don't know that we have that very many. Now we have a few under 30, but then you've got to mark all the way out to when they're going to retire. So there was a lot of bargaining last time that raised the cap some. This is in the TA. They came up with this market-based cash balance plan, which was not well received. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we don't really need to go into that right now. I think a primary one was they weren't expecting it, and the other one is they were conflating it with what had gone outside of Section 6, and the amount of the compensation credits were low, and it wasn't well understood. And the pilots had a choice, but the new plan, or one of the features of the TA, was that the legacy benefit would be sunsetted to new hires if we were going to have new hires after the DOS, the date of signing. So the company is still looking to lower their PBO. We understand that. We think it's very important for pilots to have a choice in what they're doing. So we approached this last fall with 3 plans: an increase to the legacy FAE cap, sticking with the market plan that had been already negotiated, but with a different twist on it, using a flat dollar where everybody got the same amount, because that would allow you to work around the compensation limits, and then a straight defined contribution plan, similar to what you see at the other legacy carriers. The company wasn't receptive to that, as we saw that in their proposal. We went through that. We understand that. We're disappointed. However, we've got to move forward. And so what we're going to try to do this week a little segue into this week, is we're going to try to get on common ground with them regarding structure. And we think we have a very innovative way to address that meets our concerns, encourages migration, and hopefully find a solution to that. So that's the retirement part, John. And the other thing that we talked about last week were the 412 and 25. Excuse me. We talked thematically with them about easier stuff, about real-time trip trading, open time. Went up a scale in difficulty talking about reserves. Our reserve rules are moderately archaic compared to everyone else. And then we got into, the much more things like revisions, extensions. We brought a notebook that from just 2025 has got 500 darts about here's what's going on. And it applies domestically and certainly internationally. And they continue to come in. We got one this weekend from a guy who says, look, my trip was revised 2 or 3 times. I was put on hotel standby in Anchorage, and I effectively have it completely abrogates my seniority, and I'm bidding number 3. Those are the kind of darts that come in, and we understand that. We've made our case about revisions, extensions, and then we've also gone in and talked to them about a subject that everybody's very familiar with right now is 482B and C. 482B, when it was rewritten in 2015, was done and presented at the road shows to be a speed break to slow our descent into 482C. The problem with 482B was that there was different things about meeting with the company about the consideration for early retirements, plan personal leaves of absence, different things. The company didn't have any appetite for that. The language in 482B is permissive, very much so in the company's favor, and we ended up into C. And we've talked about this a lot of times. We think we're in C because we think the SAM has been manipulated. There's been a decrease in the traditional historic numbers of reserves in order to dilute the line value, so it pushes down the SAM. So instead of being the metric of available jobs here at FedEx, the SAM became the driver. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to address this. We put ALPA's ENFA department on it. We've got some really smart people on our side. Do you do a SAM that does an arrears calculation? We've continually pulled on the SAM, and quite frankly, because of what's gone on, the pilots simply don't trust us to come up with a metric that would work. We understand that. Regarding how the pilots view the company's behavior as it applies to the SAM and 482C, it is in the single digits south of 5. So that's a very low approval rating. So this has been a difficult excursion into 482B and C. We told them it was going to be really hard to get a deal ratified. If we ended up in C, C was designed, 482B originally, and C was designed to prevent or delay a furlough. We don't think it's been applied that way. So what we've done is we've kind of flipped the script, where now the metric is consent. What we proposed was, look, go to section 4, 4A1 are the minimum, 68 and 85. If they need to go south of that, then we did add something in the furlough section 23, specifically 23A8, that, hey, if the company anticipates the need to furlough, they can come and commence conferences with the association. That's lawyer speak for negotiate. And when you negotiate, there could be multiple subjects of bargaining. It could be the lowering of the bid line guarantees, like what's happened here twice. It could be early retirement. It could be leaves of absence. It could be, like other carriers that have where 2 people can share a line. And it could be whatever fits dynamically for the situation. What's happened now is what's in the contract is a static fix, and we're in a much different dynamic. I don't know that, when they crafted this in 2015, almost 10 years ago, that they ever thought, okay, we'd be in C, and then we've got this confluence of bargaining, right? So it's no secret, that the outcome of the election in October, when we met with them about early retirements and personal leave, that the winner might be who actually won the election, and that person's very fond of tariffs. And tariffs actually, they induce some uncertainty into the worldwide shipping and global cargo networks, air cargo. We can see that. We're experiencing that now. So they saw that this was coming. They maintain, that we're overmanned. Yet they seem to have trouble covering reserve or trips with reserves because of the way they've allocated reserves. So what we want to do is say, let's take a different approach. If this is where you think you are, come talk to us. We'll try to negotiate like what happens at all the other properties. And then in the end, if we can't come to an agreement, well, the company still has the right to furlough. We would never take that position that they couldn't furlough. That's ridiculous. Furlough is an unpleasant possibility in the airline industry. That's how I ended up at FedEx. That's how a lot of our people ended up here. We're not advocating for that. But what's gone on here with 482B and C, without harping on it, Greg and I talked about this the very first time back in November, is generational damage. And what I mean by that is the goodwill has evaporated. This is not the same place where it was certainly when I came to work here, and maybe not even since when you came to work here, John.
100%.
I've got three kids that fly, two in the 121 world and one who's a guard baby fighter pilot. And right now, I wouldn't recommend they come here. That really troubles me on multiple levels. One, they're my kids and they grew up in a purple and orange household. They know that I've worked a lot for the union, but I couldn't in good conscience say, hey, unless you should come give this a shout and give it a try whenever we do hire. I have no idea when that's going to happen. But what's gone on right now is such a thing that I wouldn't recommend them come here. People don't enjoy coming to work here, and it's really unfortunate. The only thing that's going to turn this aircraft carrier around, and it's not going to happen overnight, is there has to be a collective bargaining agreement that recognizes all the input and everything that all the pilots have done for the last 10 years to contribute to the corporation's bottom line, especially since 2020. Our pay rates have been stale since November of 2020. COVID happened since 2020. You know, we were locked down, sprayed down, subjected to all sorts of stuff all around the world. We had restrictions that changed on a daily basis. Our pilots did a lot to help the company out, and they haven't seen much in return. They are looking for a meaningful contract that recognizes what they do, and if not, they're going to continue to lose people. There's out of the lower end of the list, and whenever there is a retirement in the TA, they'll probably lose quite a bit off the top. And it's unfortunate that things are this way right now. We want them to be fixed. And we think that if they give us, not if they give, please edit that out, John, or you can leave that in there, right? Not give. We're going to have to negotiate, right? We're going to have to negotiate what is recognized as due to the pilots. I believe the company, if they had a do-over, I haven't talked to them about this, is they probably wish they'd probably settled sometime in 2022 before the world shifted in the collective bargaining area. With all the new contracts, the sands have shifted under their feet and our feet, and they continue to do that. But we'll get there. I kind of got off on a little bit of a rant there, but that's what we're up against. And so what we're going to do this week, we're going to give them a retirement proposal on Tuesday. What's on the docket and the agenda is 412 and 25. We're to try to work through those areas. We're not anticipating scope proposal because they have to work it through the other areas of the company. We still haven't had their compensation. It'll be helpful when we get their compensation to see where they're thinking on hourly rates, because part of 4, it's got the rigs, and it has to do with when you're looking at retirement and percents of compensation. We know compensation historically happens at the very end, but at some point we're going to have some insight of what they're thinking and how to get this done. And of course, at the very end, there's the APRP, which is, whatever the signing bonus retro, however you want to call it, is the pilots are looking for something for recognition of what's gone on since the amendable date. That's going to end up being a large number, undoubtedly. And as it stands right now, I might have said this earlier, we owe Section 28 in retirement. Everything else is over on the company's side. you know, Section 1, Section 3 compensation, Section 4. 8 is deadheading. We still have that hanging chat out there about deadheading around the world on company aircraft. And then you've got hours of service, which is 12, and scheduling is 25. And then, of course, 31 is duration. So that's what's out there. Do we have a lot of difficult subjects? We do. We know that with your support, we can get to where we need to be, and we're going to continue to do that. And I probably just talked nonstop for however many minutes, so I'll take a breath. If you have any questions or anything else you'd like to say.
I do have a couple, but Greg, do you have any before I jump in?
I don't. Thanks, John. Go ahead.
I was curious. Obviously, we've had a big pause. We've had sessions canceled. We had mediator changeover. A lot that's transpired since the last time we really heard. So, first question: I know you met with our brothers and sisters at Brown. Has that transpired? Are we kind of on par since all of our stuff is out there on the table? I assume there's kind of an open dialogue. I would hope there's an open dialogue that's going on between us and our counterparts. So we're kind of rowing same way, same day.
So we did meet with them in February. Uh, the IPA runs a much different type of operation than we do. They're very successful. I'm not privy to where they are right now in bargaining. I just know that they've opened and that they're moving forward. That's a very good question. And people ask, well, when are we going to get a deal? And I borrowed this from Bob Kameny from years ago. The company will make a deal when it's in their best interest to get a deal, and that could be because they've got new contracts they've got out there working on. It could be just because it's time to end this thing, or it could be like what has happened in the past when the IPA is closing in on a deal, because that impacts things. So there's no doubt the IPA has historically bargained well. They've run a couple extensions lately. That probably enters into it, but they run a very tight ship regarding the information sharing. They're an outstanding union. I'm glad we had the opportunity to visit with them, John. I'll just say I don't think it hurts that they're bargaining right now.
Fair enough. My next question, it's a subjective one, but again, outside kind of looking in or trying to get a vibe for how it's going subjectively, do you feel like there's progress being made, or it's just, hey, again, what I hear is we've laid everything out there on the table and we're really not having any kind of dialogue back and forth. Is there kind of progress being made? What's your feeling?
Yes, I think so. Look, there's no doubt when we met with them for the first time in August and then at the table for the first time in September, they weren't pleased with us because they had worked with another negotiating committee for multiple years. I think they're disappointed that the TA failed. We said earlier in the fall, and I'm not trying to be a smart aleck about it, was they hadn't gotten over the divorce. But that things happened. We went through the fall. We've had testy exchanges, but we believe on our side that progress is being made, and we want progress to be made. I saw an attitudinal shift a little bit last week. It doesn't mean they're going to acquiesce and give us everything we want, but what we're looking for is engagement, because that's the only way this thing gets settled, right? It's going to do nobody any good to sit there and fold your arms and just stare at each other while we have more people like Greg retire off the top of the list without his retirement being fixed. And so we've actively sought engagement, and we think that happened last week. We're looking for engagement this week. So it's like I said, I know some people thought after they read that update I put out last week that this guy needs to be on lithium. He's all over the place, because the first thing I said was we finally think we're on a path to go to the right in the right direction, and then I talked about how hard it is. Well, they're not mutually exclusive. Look, do we have a big ask on the table? We do, because we can't afford to have a failure this time. Are we going to come off our positions? We will appropriately. We need to see what their compensation is so we can fashion together a package that meets the needs. It would drive you crazy if you were to have my job, well, for a lot of reasons, but mainly what you have to step back and go is, man, we cannot be all things to all people. But what we're trying to do is do the most good for the most number of FedEx pilots. And I've joked in the past, in the end, I'm just trying to minimize the number of people that hate me in our committee. Um, and it's tough. And it's just like, in retirement, we're trying to give pilots choices. We don't want pilots to be forced into something. And it's easy, like, if you're going to construct a different retirement plan, it's easy to figure out like my benefit because I'm at the end of the rope. You're a much younger person and a new hire. It's much easier to figure that. It's the people in the middle that we refer to as the donut hole in retirement that you got to make sure you're not leaving them behind. So it's going to be tough bargaining. I think, at the end of the week, our goal is to say, yeah, that was a great productive week. And we're going to look forward to getting back the next time, which is scheduled for the end of May.
I guess it brings up another thought of mine. So I know there's a big gap for this unscripted, and then admin and logistics to put this one together. So hopefully back on a normal timeline. Right. But kind of jumping back to your email that you sent out. So I just flew last week, murmurings around, we'll see it. It's like text messages. You don't get the tone that usually comes through with the text message. So you don't know if it's sarcasm or might be.
Right.
You'd mentioned, we talked beforehand too, kind of the parting shot there where there was maybe some sentiment that people thought, hey, we're not gonna be able to get what we want. So we're kind of giving up or changing course. Can you address that?
Oh, the way I ended that update?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So when I said we want to get an agreement, excuse me, that significantly ratifies and returns us to our former place. So our former place this was a destination airline. The guy that sponsored me here back when you could have one sponsor a year, left American on his very first day of class. In fact, when I was a new hire at American, literally the very first day, the guy said, hey, come back in 15 minutes. He goes, we used to give guys 30 minutes and we had one guy didn't come back on the break. Well, that's the guy that sponsored me here because he left because he got called to come to work at FedEx. This is where we used to be. That's where we were. And, we have, throughout our history, we've had pilots that have come from other airlines. And, like back in the 90s, the reason people were coming here because it was stable. If you work like I did at American, they had a pay cap. So even if you flew some extra, it got deposited in they had a cap and bank system, and you would put that money in the bank later on. In other words, you had a cap on how much money you could make. That wasn't true here. So the answer to your question, John, is that we want to negotiate something that people aren't going to hold their nose and vote for. That it's like, oh, that's good, and not only is that good, it's like, please, can we get this ratification over with so it can go into effect? That kind of good, because we know it would not be good at all on either side to have a failure because we're sitting on a second one. So internally, our committee has a very high threshold. And if it passes our threshold, which is unfortunate, I'm sure, is how the company negotiators view it, it's got to pass our threshold, because then we know it's going to get a lot of scrutiny at the MEC level. And then, of course, it's going to get the ultimate scrutiny from the pilots. So when I say, significantly ratify, you don't hear us say industry leading this, industry leading that, because we might not hit industry leading this or that. We're trying to do very, very well. But if you didn't hit that, does that mean that it's an overall failure? So it's not code. I'm not lowering your expectations. I'm just saying that we're going to do something that our goal is so it significantly ratifies. Like in pay, the MEC stated goals haven't changed. Openers haven't changed from 2021. It's industry leading pay rates. Okay, that didn't happen in the TA, other than it was pretty close for the 7.6, but pay is hourly rate times however you're getting paid for that trip. That's why, and I've done it in the past, it's like meaningful compensation or increases. So we are going to do our absolute level best to get you and the other pilots up to where it is, so that whenever FedEx needs pilots again and someone's leaving the military or another carrier, they have a difficult choice when it comes to, do I want to go there or over here? And right now, I don't think we're even in consideration. So that's what we're trying to say. Again, and more importantly, somebody asked me about that because I spoke in the hub the other night afterwards, and I said I would much rather under promise and over deliver rather than make some Namath like prediction, that we might not be able to back up.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Well, guys, I think this we could call it a wrap. John and John. Hey,
Right.
just on a personal side here, John Gustafson, thanks for all your time, efforts. A lot of people don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but I truly, truly do appreciate all your efforts that you, Tom, Alan, and the other guys have done in support of this crew. Rain, over to you. Thanks for stepping up. I appreciate it. I have no doubts that this is Unscripted is going to go better than it has in the past due to your your eloquence, good looks, and that young age that you have. But thank you for stepping up and helping us out. That really is well appreciated. So if nothing else, we'll call this thing a wrap, and I'll be looking from afar to see how this thing all turns out. I wish you guys the best of luck in getting that contract that everyone deserves. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Greg.